Hi, Cardstack community. My name is Christy. I'm the founding director of the Cardstack project, coming to you from the land of the Web3. This is a great opportunity for us to meet with David Vorick. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yep, that's correct.
All right, he is the one of the lead developer and co-founder of the Skynet project, one of the very important decentralized hosting storage. I'll get him to tell us more about what it is and what it can be, and then that's a very important building block, obviously, of the full stack Web3 experience that we're all building towards. Welcome, David.
Great to be here.
So we are obviously very excited to have David to give us his thoughts about the Web3, not only what it is today, but what it can be when it becomes hopefully the extension and migration of the web as we know today to a web that contains more of the concept of data ownership and privacy and control and share attribution and maybe even share monetization and value creation. But before we jump into those topics, which are very exciting, I would love to give David an opportunity to introduce himself and maybe the project he's working on with Skynet.
Sure. My name is David Vorick. I'm the lead developer of Skynet. Several years ago, I co-founded the SIA protocol. We launched in 2015, which I can't believe it's been 8 years now. But yeah, we've been running a blockchain in production for 8 years. And yeah, our vision is to take the internet as it is today. I think the Web2 giants, Amazon, Facebook, Google, have really taken control of the internet and the users and the data and made it their own and kind of see users as like this farm that they can just exploit. But the truth is that the internet was not built by Google or Facebook. It was built by us. When you think about things like social graphs, it was Facebook going around interviewing people, building friends lists. No, you were the one who was thinking about your friends and connecting with people. You're the one making groups. You're the one making interesting posts. So the value of the internet is created by people. And today it's captured by corporations and controlled by corporations. So we want to build a brighter tomorrow where the value is created by people still, and the value is captured by the people who create it. And the internet is controlled by the people who use the internet, as opposed to these overlords that are just machines essentially.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. I think the people who are born of the TikTok era doesn't even know that an all-knowing algorithm shouldn't be controlling everything you see on the internet. And it seems like the later you're born into the structure, the more we forget what the idea was when we first came up with this first packet and connect two computers we didn't think of, and all of them will be on one computer somewhere in Mountain View.
Yeah, exactly. So we gotta spread it back out and basically take control again for ourselves.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about the relationship between the concept of this kind of storage-based blockchain that is the SIA project and your vision of Skynet. It seems to be that you're taking the approach is that the blockchain can exist on its own, but the bridge to where people are, their daily live experience on the web, that has to be a gateway, a portal to do that. And it seems like you guys are taking that approach of like not only building this new utopia identity, but finding a way to connect it to the lives of internet, people. So can you tell me about how you came up with this idea of like Skynet and the portal idea?
Yeah, so as we were trying to grow the SIA network and get more people to start using it, we realized that most people interact with not just crypto, but really most of your digital interactions happen either through a cell phone or through a web browser. And even on a cell phone, most of your apps are just web browsers wrapped with a pretty UI. Like it's essentially the web browser all the way down these days. And we realized that if you can't connect the blockchain to the web browser, you're not going to get distribution. You're not going to get people using it because it's just people don't download and install applications anymore, at least not on a regular basis. If you want to reach 1 billion people, you can't do it that way. So Skynet was our kind of strategy for bridging this decentralized core that ran on a computer in a separate application and figuring out how do we connect that to the everyday user and meet the user in a place where they already exist and are happy to be. And so we've basically taken this decentralized cloud, where you can upload data, own it yourself, share it with other people, and we've connected it to the web browser where people can just use it the way that they would use Facebook or Coinbase or TikTok. We wanted to make sure that the experience felt familiar and it wasn't, this big learning curve that you have to overcome to make the jump into Web3.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm a web maximalist, not a Bitcoin or even Ethereum maximalist. I think the open web is the best thing that's happened, and after the proliferation of the App Store and the amazing distribution of the phones and the supercomputer in pocket, we are yearning from the day where you don't need permission from one company and a reviewer to get an application approved for version 1.7.64, which is completely ridiculous, but absolutely the reality of most teams building for a mass market. So I am delighted to hear more people pushing, hey, maybe our future is in our past. Maybe the web browser, the web platform, the web runtime is where the future can be built. I am curious about your thoughts about web browser and what it contains. Runtime, markup, and what it doesn't. A lot of things that was taken out of the web browser provide that security and safety and sandboxing, so you don't have random software running on your computer. To some degree, you can still have, but it's much better than the worst version of that, right? But those things do take away from our ability to do like real key management and real kind of like enclave that you could do if you were Apple, or you could try to do if you were building an Apple-based wallet. But what's your thoughts about the missing piece of true key ownership of like owning the actual encryption root that allows you to actually control the data? How does that reconcile for the web browser, the distribution model, the risk model, the plugin model that people have been trying to patch over like MetaMask, adding some native code into the Chrome? What's your thoughts on that balance and that dance?
Yeah, so I've spent probably the last 6 months just very, very buried in browser documentation, specification. I've read probably 1,000 pages of material on how the web browser works, how JavaScript works, and how all these things piece together. And it started with just like a weekend project. I just wanted to understand what was possible. And in my, first weekend of exploration, I walked away thinking, wow, a lot is possible. A ton of things are possible. And so that's what really kicked it off into a much deeper, almost free fall of learning to see what we can do. And I think that I've settled on the idea that perhaps with the exception of being able to directly connect to specialized hardware, the browser is a fully capable operating system that actually provides a lot of superior advantages over something like Linux. For example, in the web browser, we can create an operating system where each application that the user installs is fully sandboxed. You don't have to worry as a developer that the user is going to install something that reads your files and steals the data or steals the keys. So we've found that we can let developers build much more freely, just because, again, the security model is a lot better. It's like we can throw any random piece of code on the user's operating system in the cloud. Because the sandboxing is so strong, we know that that random piece of code is not going to be able to do any damage if it was written by a bad guy. And so that's been incredible. And as you mentioned, right now there's no easy way to connect to a hardware wallet and give the user like super good control over their keys. But we've found, except for that, everything else seems to be in place to perform well. And again, this is if you're using a browser extension. So if you're in the native browser, you're a lot more limited. But once you have that browser extension, a lot of doors open.
Yeah, it's interesting to think of the web browser as a adversarial environment for 25 plus years, right? It's the most adversarial. Everybody's trying to do everything to steal your data, steal your thing. Yes, it's true that blockchain is this adversarial environment. We're hearing these hacks, which are just the first dominoes that fall in an adversarial environment, but the web is even more so. And then has a longer gestation period, isn't it?
That's exactly right. Basically everything interesting about the web browser exists because of some security vulnerability that people are trying to solve. And really, a lot of the interesting things came together around 2018, 2019. I think most of the features that I'm most excited about are very new, less than 5 years old. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The web browser is so secure because it spent 25 years in like the absolute darkest, most treacherous parts of the world, and so it had to be secure. And as a result, it's like, well, let's use it, right?
Yeah.
This is a great opportunity to use something very amazing.
Yeah, it's weird to work in a field where we look at new code as exciting, but the truth is software matures, right? We're still using the network stack basically line by line as written in the early days of Linux in the Bell Labs day, and proven to work. The internet scale, nobody believed it would. A lot of theorists don't think TCP/IP would work, but it does because it's lived in this environment and improved over time. I'm curious about what specific browser technology that is emerging in the last 5 years. Do you think it's like a thing that people don't know about? A lot of people do web development, they do CSS work, they do JavaScript work, React. But what are we missing in making like SaaS apps or making, your consumer experience on e-commerce? What are we not seeing the platform that from your vantage point as a protocol designer and a Web3 kind of like inventor that you see as parts that is in this stack that people may not know?
Yeah, so the two pieces that we use the most by far are web workers and iframes. And so iframes, most the things that you read about iframes, people will tell you that they're bad and that you shouldn't use them and that, red flags everywhere. And that may have been true 10 years ago. Today, really the only bad thing is like, you can use an iframe poorly, but iframes give you this like really nice sandbox that allows you to interact with other applications. And then you have this post message way to communicate where basically if I want to talk to another application, I can put that application in an iframe, and then that application gets to decide how I can talk to it. And so that application is fully secure. It doesn't have to worry about me messing with its code. It doesn't have to worry about me accessing data that it doesn't want me to see, but it still has full control over allowing me to see anything that it wants me to use. And so we create these APIs between applications. Then web workers are just like another form of that. It's a much more lightweight. So the bad thing about iframes is that they're expensive. It can take 200 to 600 milliseconds to spin up an iframe. That's something that a user is going to notice. It's going to be visibly slow. Web workers are much faster, closer to 200 microseconds. Once 10 milliseconds to do the setup, and then communications are lightning fast. And so web workers are kind of another way to get this really clean sandbox. And then the other thing that we use a lot is something called OnBeforeRequest, which is really important for decentralization. What it allows us to do is it allows us to see a network request that's being made by the browser. We can get in the middle and return anything we want. And so from the perspective of the user, this allows us to do things like, and I'm going to use an example, OpenSea. We've been having a lot of problems with OpenSea in the past few weeks, delisting NFTs. And so you have existing applications that are talking to OpenSea that aren't finding things that used to be there. What we can do with something like the Skynet kernel is we can get in the middle of that network request that's trying to download this NFT that doesn't exist anymore. We can intercept it. We can look up that NFT on another platform, and then we can respond. We can fake a response that says, oh, hey, we found the NFT. And so the user, without having to upgrade any of their programs or other applications, can basically install like an NFT fixer that will route around OpenSea, and applications don't have to integrate with it. Applications that were calling OpenSea before can still call OpenSea, and the user will get, a completely unrelated service handling those OpenSea requests and returning the responses that are expected. So that's something I've been super excited about. It basically allows us to retroactively fix all the pieces of centralization of web apps today. And I mean, if you get more crazy, you could even do this with like Facebook, right? You could go to facebook.com and load an open source alternative to Facebook. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, I think the idea of this personal context and this kind of global context, there's always going to be a conflict. So the difference between Google search and Spotlight search, or your search within your computer, they look the same, but one allows you to look at your own files, look at a USB drive that you may not have plugged in, and that's for you. That's the index, and your world of your NFT can be your curation. Now, obviously, there's great convenience in having Google search or OpenSea search, right? That's a collecting, but that cannot be the entire universe. The fact that it's not in that convenient repository, like 60 to 80% of the stuff, doesn't mean that it disappears from the world. So this idea of having some agent to give agency on the user's computer by way of this, browser concept of OnBeforeRequest, it's a really powerful way of getting the convenience of someone making an index and keeping track of things, and still allowing for things that's outside that. It's like sideloading an Android app. It's not something you want to do all the time, but it's good that you can. I wish I can sideload an iOS app without jailbreaking. This is really cool. Oh, interesting fact. One of the first version of Cardstack, which is a decentralized UI network, a framework, was actually built on iframes. So we were like, oh, what if the UI and the code and the logic and the data is an iframe? And what if each thing can nest each other? And when we created a library called oasis.js that kind of shim on top of post message and message channel to make it all work like a kind of delegation chain, almost like a React stack kind of thing. Obviously, the latency amplifies as you nest them. So this idea of thinking about that more of as a backend or data API encapsulation by way of web worker, and then letting the front end more seamlessly stitched together in the kind of DOM without these additional browser contexts is pretty cool. I know that's very technical, but I'm certainly aware of what you've explored, and we have some ideas. And then we worked mostly on just using a server as a way to get around that. But yeah, I think when we go back to a peer-to-peer model, a lot of those capability will be an important substrate for that thing.
Just to give you some help there, the way that we ended up architecting things is that if you don't have a browser extension, what it does is your application will open one iframe. And then inside that iframe is what we call the kernel, which is this like secure context where all of your applications are running as web workers. And so to get the full benefit of all these modules and APIs and communications, you only need a single iframe in the whole page. And then if you have the browser extension, what we do is when the browser starts, we open an iframe in the context of the extension. So rather than having one iframe per web page, you actually have one iframe period. And so as soon as you're past the first second of opening the browser, all of your applications can talk to this decentralized series of APIs with no latency at all. And so it's extremely fast. And yeah, we were happy when we discovered that this was possible, to say the least.
Yeah. And I think pushing on these kind of a new deployment model of software, I think it really is the next phase, right? We've done a good job within the kind of, let's call it the Ethereum smart contract and successor like Solana, figuring out how backends can compose and be decentralized with runtime and data being spread. But on the front end side is, I think there's only a few projects even attempting to work on it. Most projects are still, here is this magical composable thing and a URL that I register on GoDaddy. That's still very much the way it works. I know you guys have a lot of kind of like both subversive, as in rescuing possibly future dying dApps from before they die, kind of make a copy of them, but also have this idea of this new way of building the UI in the way. Can you tell us a little bit about your like decentralized dApp or dApp hosting thing that you've been working on, or maybe this is what you describe as a successor of?
Yeah, so we have a product called Home Screen, which basically allows a user to install a front end into their cloud storage. And so rather than say go to app.uniswap.org, which is controlled by the developer team and they can change it out at any time, right? And so just for a little more context, like when you go to app.uniswap.org, you don't know what code your machine is running. They could be serving a completely different application that is talking to a different smart contract, and it'll look exactly the same, but you don't know if you're using the real Uniswap or if the devs did something malicious and are stealing your coins. It will look the same. And so to prevent this and make sure that things are fully decentralized, we allow the user to actually install the front end onto their cloud storage. And so they know when they open that front end and use that front end, it's the same front end as matches the code that everyone's audited. It's the same front end that they used a week ago. You have confidence that there's no way the developer team could have inserted something malicious. Or what more commonly happens, we haven't seen in crypto developer teams go rogue or malicious that often. But what we have seen is developer keys are sometimes compromised, and an attacker will find a way to push an update because they got control of the publication keys. And so the developer team is not evil, but because they lost control of the keys, someone else can pretend to be the developer team. And so home screen protects against all of these classes of attacks and makes sure that the user has confidence about what code they're running on their machine, which you just can't get from a standard, going to a URL sort of experience.
Yeah, it's amazing how often we think of a dApp and this protocol as one thing, but it's actually two things. There's the UI that gives you the numbers and the thing, and then there's the contract. And maybe harder to compromise a smart contract, but it's actually relatively easy to compromise the part that you trust, that you click on, and it interacts with your MetaMask and pretend that a message you're signing is in fact just transfer all your funds to me, right? It's very hard to know after clicking a button whether that's a swap or a give me all your bored apes. Most people can't tell,
Exactly.
especially if you wrap it in like some sort of obfuscation where there's a signature or multi-call.
Yep.
I want to talk a little bit about data privacy and specifically about metadata privacy. So one of the things I am always worried about is I go to a website and interact with them and they're tracking me across all the different sites that we have. Now, obviously, if I'm doing something on my own program or on my own desktop, that's running locally, I know that doesn't exist. When you introduce this idea of like a personal cloud, what is your kind of thinking about? Does that create a honeypot for people to see, oh, these addresses are related because this user installed the Uniswap app and was using this wallet, which is like, who owns this wallet? And then some other well-known ENS or HNS wallet. And then maybe you out yourself by way of the metadata of the association, the same cell phone call two people type of situation. What do you think is the people feeling about not only data privacy encryption, but metadata privacy of association of the activity when a additional third party, in this case, your personal gateway or personal cloud is involved?
Yeah, so we have essentially two approaches in the Skynet ecosystem. So one is for data that's public, that you want people to find it, right? And of course that exposes lots of metadata, but if it's things like tweets, right? I don't want my tweets to be private. I want people to know what I'm saying. I want people, when I make a blog post, I want people to read that. If I upload, a podcast, I want that to be public and I want that to be discoverable. So you have this discoverable bucket or file system where basically if I know your user ID on Skynet, I can check you out and I can see all of the, public apps that you use. At the same time, we have private buckets, which are obfuscated in a way that makes it basically completely disconnected from your identity. And so if you're using a private storage application, you can log in and you can see all of your storage, but nobody else knows, all they see is like a lump of files, right? They know the entire ecosystem has 2 million files, or it's more like 20, the entire ecosystem has 20 million files, but out of those 20 million files, they don't know which ones are yours. They don't know how many are yours. And so when you upload a file, you basically add it to that big pile, and you add it without any relationship to any of the other files you uploaded. Even if you upload 20 files into the same folder, as long as the developer has disconnected them properly, there's no way for an outside analyst to see those 20 files and go, oh, these belong to Chris. We know we're able to hide that relationship. So
only it's almost like getting a wallet with many addresses that you can use to each one, but it's unless you have the original root seed phrase, you don't even know those are derived from the same phrase. So in a way, they exist in the public, but the association is only available to the key holder in this case.
Exactly. And then there are plenty of ways to, I think it's easier to keep files on Skynet anonymous because they aren't on a big public ledger, right? Wallets, multiple addresses can struggle if you spend money from the, you start to mix coins together, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of de-anonymization that can happen, but with files, you don't mix two files together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. That same, like in crypto, you need a relationship. $1 has to create another dollar. You can't. But in file storage, two files can exist. They don't have to spawn from a previous file that exists. So it's much harder to de-anonymize a user's file system than it is to de-anonymize their Bitcoins that are kept in separate addresses.
Yeah, only need one mistake and like, oh, I need the, now you've tied the tree together, then you can go backward genealogy-wise and find the root thing. It's interesting about this idea of that, we see this web of, especially think about decentralized storage as this separate buckets. But then we see people like in their own lives using, not using the buckets we give them, but for example, sending themselves an attachment in Gmail as a way to remember things. Messaging is such a powerful human concept of organizing your information, emailing yourself and stuff like that. And we are seeing like, most of DAOs are basically Discord messaging, and people are thinking about messaging each other using like XMTP protocols or running matrix servers to kind of be more decentralized. What's your view of messaging as both an opportunity for decentralized messaging, but also kind of how does that relate to the file storage? Because a lot of files are stored within the graph of messages or the feed of messages. What's your sense of like decentralized messaging?
Yeah, so I think that messaging it's basically like the big unsolved problem of peer-to-peer, right? Way back in the day, you had things like Pigeon, which would try and combine all these messaging protocols together in one. Then when Web 2 really started to cement, the giants kind of took control of messaging, and Facebook's like, no, you can't access Facebook messages outside of Facebook exactly. And so you have like your Twitter DMs and your Telegram DMs and your Facebook DMs, and just everything is scattered all over the place. And that's where decentralized applications start to become interesting. In the world of Skynet, a user is the one with control. If an application builds a messaging platform, that user can basically install an upgrade to their kernel, to their operating system, that will force the messaging application, the messaging layer, to interoperate with all their other messaging layers. And so you could imagine having the same set of DMs, or when I go to Facebook and I open the DM between you and me, I have the message history from Gmail and from Telegram and from text messaging, like every single medium that we've ever messaged over. All of those messages are right there in whatever application we're talking on. So that's sort of the thing that Skynet makes possible. And then of course, the other side of this is that you can also ensure that it's end-to-end encrypted. And then you can also ensure that you're doing things like not leaking your social graph, that you're protecting, that it's not going over a central server the way it happens with Signal and Telegram. And so it allows us to kind of take messaging to the next step. But I think from a competitive standpoint, the challenge is going to be interoperating with these existing messaging systems. Like how do we have to pull people off of Facebook and Snapchat and TikTok first? And I think that's going to be it's going to be interesting to see if that unfolds.
Yeah, it's very challenging, right? Because back in the days when you have these kind of like trillion messenger where you can just have open protocols that you can kind of connect to and create like a all-in-one IM app. Now it's harder because an explicit directive from these companies to say, do not let them use we don't have an API, or you cannot put links in Instagram. Like that is like next level type of protectionist stuff. And that is the backdrop of which the user are being trapped within the system. So obviously new incentives and stuff like that will be necessary to make this happen. I'm curious to think of the kind of the flip side of the messaging, especially around end-to-end encryption. What is, I think, in my personal view, one of the most successful part of blockchain cryptocurrency is that it taught people that they can have their own keys. Or at least you can choose to have your own key. That people are gone better at say, oh, let me create my seed phrase to do something, or tools are actually introducing this concept, not just some certificate manager behind some Amazon Web Service box, right? What do you think is the kind of the challenge in building good key management, especially for hacking? Like for say, hey, can I go into your MetaMask and see your 12 words? That will allow me to really help you better in that type of bot. But without making it so that it becomes custodial, where it's like, oh, it's just trust Coinbase that they know how to do key management. All you do is a username, password. I saw your tweet about, possibly doing some sort of distributed two-factor using a key splitting algorithm called Shamir Secret, and there are many other ones. But I'm kind of curious on the thought that if messaging and managing your money and managing your permission and membership to organization is all driven by this identity, which is driven by this key, how do we manage the creation and the recovery of this key becomes more important? Can you give us some thoughts of your latest thinking around this?
Yeah, so this is, I think, one of the great, unsolved problems in blockchain. It's like users are used to having a password reset. Users are used to being able to go to the bank and say, hey, I lost my credit card. Can you fix it for me? And in the decentralized world, there's no backup. If your seed is gone, it's gone, and you just kind of got to start over. So, the question is, how can we make more reliable ways of managing your seed without also, requiring the user to be take a 6-month training course in seed safety.
In OPSEC.
So, yeah, there are two, I think, major lines of thinking right now. The first one is to basically have fancy multi-sig. We'll start there. Is like you have multiple devices that all work together to create signatures. And then the other line of thinking is that you have social recovery, which is like I give pieces of my seed to a bunch of my friends, and if I lose it, I have to go ask them to work together to rebuild me a new one.
Yeah.
And personally, I'm not a fan of the social recovery because sometimes friends can be unreliable. You're never 100% certain how a conversation with your friends is going to go.
Yes.
And so I prefer things to be completely independent. And to achieve that, I really like the way Google's latest two-factor authentication works. It's basically you go to your account, you put in a password, and then it's like, this is a new device. Go to one of your existing devices and type in these 6 numbers, and so that we know that you're the same person. And while that's occasionally stumped me, right, when I'm like way out in the middle of nowhere and I don't have any other devices,
right.
I've occasionally just been locked out. But I do think that overall it works pretty well, and that's something that we don't need a central server to do the same thing as. If every device has its own shard of your key, then you can make it so that the password plus one shard is enough to build a new shard and give a device access to your accounts. And then the other thing that I'm kind of thinking is like, there's this idea of a hot wallet and a cold wallet. And, in your hot wallet, you keep, I don't know, $200, $300. If you're a company or wealthier, maybe it's more. But the idea is that if you lose everything in your hot wallet, it's not that bad. It's like, it's not necessarily fun, but you're not ruined. You'll bounce back in, a couple weeks you'll have brushed it off. It's a bruise. And then you have your cold wallet, which has all the rest of the money in it. And so you refill your hot wallet every couple of weeks by going to your cold wallet, doing a more fancy procedure. And so I'm kind of thinking we can structure Web3 like that as well, where things like uploads, downloads, data, most of your files are read-write from the hot wallet. Maybe some you have archives and backups that are read-only. Or maybe they're only, the hot wallet can't even see your archives and backups. And then your cold wallet, maybe instead of confirming from one device, if you want to, send money from your cold wallet or make a big transaction, you have to confirm it from 3 devices, or maybe you need 3 devices and the original seed. And so I think where the UX is going to go is when a user creates a crypto identity, It's something they do a single time. You have one crypto identity across all of your blockchains and all of your wallets. You have a single seed that's really important. You put that in a vault and you hopefully never need it again. It's there in case you do, but a standard user experience, they should never have to, just like you're not supposed to have to go to the bank to use your credit card, you should never have to, open your seed to use your crypto account. And then after that, your seed is basically fractured across a bunch of your devices, and you have security protocols that are either hot protocols, which means you only need one device to do an action, or cold protocols, which means you need, say, 3 or maybe even most of your devices to perform an action. And then, of course, if for some reason you lose too many devices, let's say your house light's on fire and you lose your laptop and your computer and your phone all at once, that's what the vault is for. Now, you go back to the vault, you can rebuild from scratch. But I think for most users, if your house doesn't burn down, you just confirm on your 3 devices at once. And if you get a new device, you add it to the circle. If you lose a device, you just, you click lost device and it'll delete it from the circle. And so I think that's kind of what I've been focusing on, is probably the future user experience of seed management, because I think it's relatively easy to do that. Everyone has multiple devices and everyone usually only has a few of those devices on them at once. So it's like a nice distributed way to protect your secrets.
And people do warm up these devices. I have my passcode already in there, and there's some kind of tertiary, level 1 or 2 security that just comes with the mobile or desktop ecosystem. So that's actually pretty good. And what I love most about what you're suggesting is that multisig has been something that exists only if you have a lots of DAO treasury you need to manage before you use multisig. But this idea that multisig is in the vernacular of everyday Web3, maybe they don't know anything other than Web3, other than with a multisig, would be a much better way to introduce this idea that 2-factor or even 3-factor by default, and the number of factors really determined by the risk of your action, right? Like day-to-day stuff, 1 signature, more secret stuff, 3 more on that. I feel like as an Apple ecosystem user, I've kind of already learned that. In a way, Apple do bother you on more devices on things that are much more consequential, and they bother you on only 1 device with a trivial Face ID in some cases. I don't know if you've ever taken the subway in New York City with the transit. They don't even care. If you have the phone, you can get in, but it's less than $3 worth of value, so let's not even prompt, right? So that this kind of risk-based thing makes a lot of sense, and I think there's precedence for it. We just have to hide the cryptography.
Yeah, and I really do think the giants, Apple, Google, have done the heavy lifting. They've trained consumers for us. They've taught consumers safe behaviors for doing risky things, and since consumers are already educated on safe behaviors, let's take advantage of that and let's do more, make more use of that.
Yeah, I think the current state of MetaMask support on Twitter, it's very, very far from even where the big tech has already done. So we have catch up to do in Web3. The stakes are higher, right? Your key can unlock a lot more things than a single password can, especially if you use a password manager. I'm dubiously I want to be in the meeting where the MetaMask team says, here's your 12-word phrase, please put in a place like a password manager. It's like, I see this helps most people, but that's not a good place to be, to ask people to take the entire seed phrase to your MetaMask and put in a third-party service that could be compromised one day when there's many seed phrases on that. How valuable is that data center or virtual data center? I feel that that advice is kind of questionable. That's my personal qualm with MetaMask.
Agreed.
And so I want to kind of get your thoughts on, obviously we talked about a couple of frontiers of if we do these things and then Web3 can happen. Obviously crypto can happen just with a Binance account, and people are pretty happy with OpenSea and Binance and Coinbase as the little, plaything. Some people have become wealthy, some people have become powerful. But as far as influence over the world of people using digital technology, crypto really hasn't made a tiniest of dent, right? 0.01% adoption in the world where 80% of people have mobile phones, right? So we have a long way to go. If you want to wave a magic wand, what do you think is a piece of technology or breakthrough or UX or whatever it might be, a social construct that you believe will actually open the gate for actual migration of users who will switch substitution from a tool they use in Web 2 to a tool in Web 3 en masse?
Yeah, that's the magic question, isn't it? So if you go back over the history of web applications, I think you generally find that users switched because it did something new that was not easily done before. So the origin of YouTube was you could see music videos. YouTube really, I think, got big on the back of being almost like a music piracy platform. Facebook got big on the back of being essentially a way to stalk popular people or stalk the person that you had a crush on. And so Facebook kind of also its origin was like it solved almost like something naughty that people wanted to do. Snapchat, kind of a similar thing. It was a way to have disappearing messages and disappearing photographs. And so there's, again, kind of like Snapchat kicked off on this almost like naughty thing that people were allowed to do all of a sudden that you couldn't do with technology before. So I don't know that I've found the right application for Web3, but like things like OnlyFans comes to mind. Things like, a problem that's not been solved yet is media distribution. YouTube kind of solved that problem, and then the problem unsolved itself later on. And so if you want to watch a show or you want to watch a movie, which platform do you need to be on to see that show or movie? You don't know. I don't know. Maybe Netflix is having a good day today. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's Hulu. Maybe it's none of them. And so that's kind of one thing that stands out to me as a potential opportunity. But really, it's probably nothing that I listed today. I'm looking for that one use case where suddenly people can do something that they couldn't do before that just feels good. And then people switch to Web3 because it's something that they can't do anywhere else. So
I think there's always a moment. Yeah, I said that. I think the heuristic could be like, I shouldn't be able to do this. Like when you're doing something, you're like, this can't be right? And I agree with you. Like some of the genesis of the technology, there's a lot of PR and like paper over and make everything all okay, and you have the community best interest in mind. But there's always a moment where technology is like, I shouldn't be able to just download this MP3 for free, right? But then later on, people say, hey, this is a licensed version, and Spotify happened, right? I still remember the YouTube moment for me was when Justin Timberlake posted a video, right? It was a pirated video from Saturday Night Live, and that became the first like really viral hit because it was kind of that intersection of a uncontrolled streaming platform. NBC didn't have a streaming platform back then that anybody can use, and then I think these kind of moments are the accent, but the technology has to be like, I shouldn't be able to do this. So it seems like money is not enough, right? So people feel like, oh, I'm trading tokens or I'm flipping NFT, but that doesn't seem like the real thing.
Well, maybe, we've seen these like simp DAO things. I think, OnlyFans is crossing into interesting territory where it's like you can purchase content that's exclusive and secret and only you can see, and that's been very successful. But like, what if you could own that person, right? What if you added an ownership bit that's like, I have a 5% stake in this just really attractive person, and that might, maybe that's the like, I shouldn't be able to own this person.
Well, you think about like how Twitch streams and like, getting that person that you respect, whether it is a gamer or some other celebrity of sorts, to get them to say your name, to get them to acknowledge you exist. I mean, people spend $500 for like 1 second of that stuff. And then, again, that nobody talks about that, but that was the moment. It was like, wow, this chat stream and this video and this person was something you're not supposed to be able to do, get someone to acknowledge you.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think Web3, because what makes Web3 special is the money component. We have more powerful money primitives than any other technology in the world. That's why it's called Web3. And I think if we can find something, just a little bit special that you can do with money, that's going to be the moment.
I completely agree. And I think thinking about these kind of deeper use cases, not just like acronyms like, SimDAO, for example, we just said it's like a combination of 4 different information before you do it. And it's like, it's a chat room where you get access as a person that you really want attention from because they are attractive or powerful, what it might be. But that, these kind of cultural constructs are in this mixing pool of ideas funded and facilitated by both interest and the monetization that comes with the interest is a powerful, I think, primordial soup of sorts for interesting molecules that comes out that may one day become the ones in there. So, it's always been kind of our goal at Cardstack to build some of the basic primitives, and what we're working on is more of the UI composable layer. You're working on whether it's key management and the gateway and the ability for people to kind of run this kernel that allows them to have more ownership over the application that connects to the protocol on the other side, where there's one protocol from Ethereum or another one from Solana. So it's really, really cool to speak with people actually building this stuff, because we may not be the inventor or the discovery of this meme or this viral thing that made it possible, but I know they're going to need a wallet, a key, a recovery, a way to interact with the application, a way to be safe, and a way to do it again because they didn't get completely wiped out. So it's really delightful. Is there something that in your mind or in your future plans of Skynet Lab that you want our community and our shared community to know about? I want to give you some opportunity to talk about that.
Yeah, it's still a little bit early, but we've been working very hard on a new blockchain, which combines a whole bunch of ideas that just like general concerns we've had with the blockchain space. Like the number of people who run their own nodes is rapidly dropping, right? Especially as we move away from Bitcoin to Ethereum and then Solana and then Avalanche. We've kind of outsourced the trust to these set of validators, and then just kind of assume that the validators are going to keep everything running smoothly, which I think is a terrible assumption. And that we did the exact same thing with Facebook and Google, and look where we ended up.
And don't get me started on bridges. Don't get me started on number of validator per bridge.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you're going to blink twice, and then you're going to realize, wait, 80% of our validators by stake are VCs in America. Oh, wait. VC's got a bunch of subpoenas from the United States. Oh, wait, now we can't transact anymore. We have to go through KYC to use crypto at all. I kind of see that. That's one future that I'm afraid of, that I think crypto is going to get completely bottlenecked back into TradFi just because, we've stopped running our own full nodes. And so we've been working on a blockchain full node that runs entirely in the web browser. So that's one piece of it, is we have this new piece of technology. It's an ultra lightweight blockchain. A lot of tricks that have been invented between 2017 and 2022 are at play to make it possible. And so keep an eye out for that. And then the other piece of this is we really think that monetization should be more open, like way, way more open. Every person should have their own token. Every application should have its own token. Every video should have its own token. And all these tokens should be connected to each other and referencing each other. And so it's like, if you like a video and you're like, oh yeah, this video is amazing, and so I'm going to buy $100 NFT. So the first thing is you should be able to buy an NFT of any piece of content on the internet. If it exists, you should be able to, without any, interaction with anyone else, you should be able to just buy $100 NFT of that piece of content. And then secondly, if that content is the product, right, it's a video made by someone who remixed elements from these 4 other videos that are hosted on a platform that was made using XYZ software that had, these 3 libraries in it that, every single piece of the internet is a collaboration of a bajillion ideas from different people. And I really think that one of the greatest tragedies of Web 2 is theft, in the sense that someone's like, oh no, YouTube, it's just YouTube. You pay YouTube. YouTube did all this stuff. And so Web 2 does not respond well to all of the full contribution graph that made something possible. And just the other day, I was on Node.js and I did, I forget what command, like a npm install or something.
Yes.
And then it said, 280 projects are looking for funding. And I was like, what?
Yes.
Like, some of these projects are definitely used by Google, used by Facebook. Like, these people are writing code that makes Facebook possible. Why aren't they being monetized? Every single time that you run a piece of code, that piece of code should get a little bit of revenue if you're doing revenue producing actions. And so that's the other piece that's connected to the blockchain we're launching, is this idea that monetization should be universal. Just absolutely everything should be monetized and should all be connected together in a way that pays respects financially to anyone who contributed to making something possible. So it's called Skynet Coin. Keep your eye out for Skynet Coin or Skynet token. We are excited for it. It's not quite ready for all the details to be public, but in the next 2-3 months, we should have a white paper. We should have a test net. It's very far along, and we're excited to be presenting it to the world.
It's so exciting. I think this idea of, your action and the thing and your graph of contribution, like what you put into the internet on the web to make it happen, the money should flow exactly the same way. Like, you should just follow the contribution graph in the reverse direction and try to make sure that everybody say, hey, maybe the difference is in Web 2, I give, some get, most don't. This one, I get exactly what I contributed. And by the way, because the value is captured by this network and not some other external investors, there is just more to come by. Maybe there's more incentive for people to keep making, and then it replaces some of the infrastructure. So I think that basic idea of reversing the contribution graph or creating a backflow of value is really interesting. At Cardstack, one of the things we've done, I had a data analytic background, is to see if it's possible to use machine learning and kind of the Python ecosystem as a off-chain compute to do some of these kind of distribution value calculations. So leveraging the building of the graph using more expensive blockchain operation, but using cheaper off-chain resource to do the number crunching, and then write back Merkle proofs on chain for further distribution. So we are doing this on a fairly heavyweight blockchain like the EVM blockchain, but because all of our computation for the reasoning of who gets what because of the action they've taken, similar to PageRank and other like a social graph thing, that's done entirely using data science tools. You have to get a consensus of the analytics miners doing the computation, but the distribution is just, hey, I've got a proof that I received $6 because of these 17,000 things I did, but it's one transaction redeem or rolls over the next cycle. So we're actually actively working on that. We'd love to collaborate with you to see if our off-chain computation and your on-chain collection and distribution can work together, because I feel like that may be a good collaboration opportunity for us. But we are totally aligned on monetization being one of the special sauce. And justice, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk offline further and see more about what you're working on and how we can fit these pieces together.
Yeah, so this is super exciting. It's a great honor for me to talk to you. Cardstack had a white paper in 2017, and on I think slide 2, we mentioned Saya as one of the pillars of compute and storage and stuff like that. So it's great to see that the quest don't end. The fact that there are peaks and valleys and bulls and bears within the market until everybody is using Web3, owning their key and owning the data. I don't think our work is done. So thank you so much for spending the time today. And if you enjoyed this session, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast in various distribution. And until next time, thank you very much, and I'll see you.
It's great to be here.